The massive alien ship called Convergence moved slowly through the dark space between stars like a giant metal city floating in the void. Inside its bright halls walked beings from dozens of different worlds. Commander Zexthara stood tall on the bridge with her crystal-like skin catching the light from the control panels. Her people, the Vorthak, had ruled this part of space for thousands of years using their advanced technology and bioelectric minds that could speak without words next. To her stood Clicker warriors with their hard-shell bodies and many arms working the ship controls with perfect timing. These insect-like beings shared thoughts through invisible connections that linked all their minds together like a vast network. In the lower decks, the gaseous Nephilim floated in their special suits that kept their energy bodies from spreading apart into nothing. The ship had been exploring this empty region of space for many cycles, looking for new worlds and ancient secrets. Their scanners had found something strange on a small planet below them. The readings showed structures that seemed very old, but also signs of current activity. Commander Zexthara ordered the ship to move closer to investigate what they had discovered. On the planet's surface, Dr. Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his face as he carefully brushed dirt away from an ancient stone carving. The hot sun beat down on the dig site where he and his small team had been working for months. His colleague Dr. Lisa Carter called out from across the excavation area where she was documenting their latest finds with her camera and notebook. Jake was a tall man with strong hands that had spent years learning how ancient people made their tools and weapons. He could look at a piece of broken pottery or a chipped stone blade and tell you exactly how it was made and what it was used for. Lisa was equally skilled at understanding old civilizations and had traveled to dig sites all around Earth, studying how humans had lived before modern technology. Ben Torres, their young geologist, was mapping the rock layers that told the story of how this planet had changed over millions of years. Amy Foster, the team botanist, was collecting samples of the strange plants that grew here, trying to understand how they survived in such a harsh environment. Kate Phillips, their materials expert, was analyzing the composition of the ancient structures. They had uncovered the human team had arrived here 6 months ago on their small research ship after detecting signs of an advanced civilization that had vanished long ago. Their equipment was simple compared to what other species used, but it was reliable and easy to repair when things went wrong. High above them, the alien ship Convergence settled into orbit and began scanning the planet with instruments far more advanced than anything humans had ever built. The aliens looked down at the primitive beings working in the dirt with their crude tools and metal devices. To the Vorthak and other advanced races, these humans seemed barely above the level of animals scratching in the ground. Commander Zexthara decided to send down a landing party to make contact with these primitive creatures and perhaps learn something about the ancient ruins they were digging up. She was curious about what such backward beings might have discovered that her own advanced scanners had missed. As the alien shuttle descended toward the dig site, something unexpected happened. Ancient systems buried deep in the planet began to wake up after sleeping for countless ages. Massive generators hidden in the planet core started to hum with power that had been waiting for this moment. The first sign of trouble came when the shuttle controls stopped working. The pilot tried every system, but nothing responded to his commands. The craft fell from the sky and crashed into the desert sand near the human camp with a sound like thunder. On the ship above, Commander Zexthara watched in horror as every system on Convergence began to fail one by one. The lights went out and the air recycling stopped working. The artificial gravity shut down and crew members began floating helplessly through the corridors. Emergency systems that should have activated remained silent and dead. The bioelectric fields that allowed the Vorthak to communicate with each other suddenly vanished, leaving them isolated in their own minds for the first time in their lives. The Clicker neural networks collapsed and the warrior insects found themselves cut off from the hive mind that had guided their every action since birth. Worst of all, the Nephilim containment suits failed and the gaseous beings began to spread apart and fade as their energy forms lost cohesion without the technology that held them together. Panic spread through the ship as hundreds of aliens realized they could not operate even the most basic systems. The great vessel that had traveled between stars for centuries was now nothing more than a dead hulk falling toward the planet's surface. It crashed into the desert with tremendous force, creating a crater that could be seen from space. Many aliens died in the impact, but hundreds more survived the crash only to face an even worse fate. They found themselves stranded on an alien world, with no working technology and no idea how to survive. Without the machines that had taken care of their every need for generations, they could not make fire or find water or even open their own food containers without the automated systems they had always relied upon. Jake Morrison heard the crash and saw the smoke rising from beyond the ridge where the alien ship had come down. He gathered his team and they hiked across the desert to investigate what had happened. What they found amazed them more than any ancient artifact they had ever discovered. Hundreds of alien beings wandered around the wreckage, looking lost and confused. Their fantastic technology was completely dead, and they seemed unable to understand why nothing worked anymore. Jake realized that whatever had caused this massive failure had not affected human equipment at all. Their mechanical tools still functioned perfectly, and their simple electronic devices continued to work normally. Jake began to understand that something about this planet was stopping advanced technology from operating while leaving primitive systems untouched. He approached Commander Zexthara, who was standing among her crystal people looking more vulnerable than any alien leader had ever appeared to human eyes. Through gestures and simple words, Jake tried to communicate that he wanted to help them survive this crisis. The proud commander who had ruled star systems and commanded vast fleets found herself dependent on a primitive human who still used metal, tools, and burned chemical fuel for power. It was a humbling moment that would change everything both species thought they knew about intelligence and survival. The first 3 days after the crash were the hardest. Alien beings who had never needed to worry about food or water or shelter found themselves facing the most basic challenges of survival. Many of the Vorthok sat in small groups trying unsuccessfully to re-establish their bioelectric communication networks. The Clicker warriors wandered aimlessly without the hive mind to guide their actions. Several Nephilim had already faded away completely when their containment suits failed. Jake Morrison knew they had very little time before more aliens would die from thirst and starvation. He organized his human team to start teaching the survivors the most essential skills needed to stay alive on this harsh world. Lisa Carter began showing small groups how to identify which plants were safe to eat and which ones would make them sick. She used simple drawings in the sand to explain the differences between helpful and dangerous vegetation. Ben Torres led expeditions to find water sources using techniques his grandfather had taught him during camping trips in the mountains back on Earth. He showed the aliens how to follow animal tracks to watering holes and how to dig wells in dry riverbeds where underground streams still flowed. The aliens watched in amazement as this young human could find life-giving water using nothing but his eyes and experience. Amy Foster worked with the alien botanist to create a simple classification system for the local plants using basic observation, rather than complex chemical analysis. She taught them to test new foods carefully by tasting tiny amounts first and waiting to see if they caused any bad reactions. Many aliens had never eaten natural food before and found the process both strange and frightening. Kate Phillips proved invaluable when it came to understanding how to work with the materials they found around the crash site. She showed the aliens how to identify different types of rock and metal and explained which ones could be shaped into useful tools. Her knowledge of metallurgy and chemistry was essential even though they had no modern equipment to work with. Real breakthrough came when Jake began teaching basic tool-making skills to anyone willing to learn. He started by showing Commander Zexthara how to make fire using friction between two pieces of dry wood. The proud Vorthak leader struggled with this simple task that human children could master, but Jake was patient and encouraging. Jake found a good piece of flint rock and demonstrated how to chip away small pieces to create sharp edges. He explained how ancient humans had learned to shape stone into knives and spearheads thousands of years ago. The aliens watched with growing interest as Jake created a razor-sharp cutting tool using nothing but rocks and careful strikes with another stone. When The first large predator appeared near their makeshift camp. Jake knew they needed weapons quickly. The creature was twice the size of Earth bears with thick hide and massive claws that could tear through metal. The aliens had never seen anything so dangerous up close since their energy weapons and protective shields had always kept them safe from harm. Jake worked through the night creating spears from straight branches and sharp stone points. He showed Ben and Amy how to tie the spearheads firmly in place using plant fibers twisted into strong cord. By morning they had a dozen functional weapons that looked primitive, but were deadly effective. The first test came when two of the predators approached their water source where several aliens were trying to fill containers. Jake organized a group of volunteers including Commander Zextara and three Clicker warriors who had learned to work together without their hive mind connection. Jake showed them how to move quietly and coordinate their attacks without making noise that would alert their prey. He explained that hunting required patience and teamwork rather than superior firepower. The aliens found this concept difficult to understand at first since they were used to solving problems with advanced technology. The attack was swift and successful. Jake led the charge with his stone-tipped spear while the others followed his example and struck from different angles. The predator fell quickly under their coordinated assault. The aliens stared in shock at what they had accomplished using these simple weapons and basic tactics. Commander Zextara held her spear with new respect and looked at Jake with something approaching admiration. For the first time she began to understand that human primitiveness was actually a different kind of sophisticated knowledge that her people had forgotten in their rush toward technological advancement. Over the following days, more aliens asked to learn these survival skills. Jake found himself teaching spear throwing and basic hunting techniques to beings from a dozen different worlds. Lisa showed them how to preserve meat by smoking it over slow fires and how to prepare plant medicines from local herbs. The most important lesson was learning to work together without relying on technology to coordinate their efforts. The Vorthak had to relearn how to communicate using spoken words and hand signals. The Clicker discovered they could function as individuals while still cooperating with others through simple agreement and shared goals. Amy made a crucial discovery when she found that certain local plants contained compounds that could help the fading Nephilim maintain their energy forms without technological assistance. She created a natural treatment using crushed leaves and mineral water that helped stabilize the gaseous beings long enough for them to learn other survival techniques. Ben located several caves that would provide better shelter than the exposed crash site. He taught the aliens how to evaluate different locations for safety and comfort and how to modify natural shelters to meet their specific needs. Soon they had established a much more secure base camp with proper protection from weather and predators. Kate worked with a team of alien engineers to salvage useful materials from the crashed ship without relying on any advanced tools. They learned to cut metal using controlled heating and cooling techniques and how to shape materials through careful hammering and bending. Jake created more sophisticated weapons as his skills improved and as he found better materials to work with. He discovered that bones from the large predators could be shaped into extremely effective spearheads and arrow points that were much sharper and stronger than stone. The aliens watched in fascination as Jake carved intricate hunting tools from materials they had considered worthless. The most significant change was in leadership dynamics. Commander Zextara found herself following Jake's guidance in matters of survival while still maintaining authority over her own people. She began to appreciate that different situations required different kinds of expertise and that technological superiority did not automatically make someone the best leader. By the end of the first month, the mixed group had developed into an efficient survival community. Aliens who had never worked with their hands were becoming skilled at making tools and weapons. Beings who had lived their entire lives in climate-controlled environments had learned to read weather patterns and find shelter from storms. Jake realized they had achieved something remarkable. Instead of simply keeping the aliens alive until rescue arrived, they had created a functioning society that combined the best aspects of human adaptability with alien knowledge and capabilities. The foundation had been laid for something entirely new in the galaxy. 6 weeks had passed since the Great Crash, and the mixed community of humans and aliens had settled into a routine that none of them could have imagined before. The survivors had learned to work together in ways that transcended their original species barriers. Vorthok crystal beings worked alongside insect-like Clicker warriors, while the remaining Nephilim energy forms had stabilized enough to contribute their unique perspectives to group planning. Jake Morrison had become the unofficial leader for survival matters, while Commander Zexthara handled disputes between different alien groups. The arrangement worked well until the morning when massive tracks appeared around their camp perimeter. The prints were larger than anything they had seen before and showed claw marks that could tear through solid rock. Lisa Carter was the first to spot the creature that had made these tracks. She called it a bone crusher after watching it snap a thick metal beam from the crashed ship like it was a dry stick. The beast stood 4 meters tall at the shoulder and was covered in thick plates of natural armor that seemed impervious to their stone spears and bone arrows. Ben Torres studied the creature from a safe distance and reported that its hide was at least 10 centimeters thick in most places, with overlapping scales that deflected even their sharpest weapons. Amy Foster observed its feeding habits and discovered it was attracted to the smell of their food stores and the alien technology that still contained trace energy signatures. The first attack came at dawn when 2 bone crushers approached the camp from different directions. Jake organized the defenders quickly, but their spears bounced harmlessly off the creature's thick hide. 3 Clicker warriors were injured before the beasts lost interest and wandered away looking for easier prey. Commander Zexthara called a council meeting that included representatives from all surviving species. She spoke bluntly about their situation, explaining that conventional weapons would not be sufficient to protect them from creatures this size and strength. Several aliens suggested abandoning the camp and moving to a more defensible location. Jake had a different idea. He had been studying the bone structure of smaller predators they had successfully hunted and believed he could create more effective weapons using principles he had learned from studying prehistoric human hunting techniques. He explained his plan to create composite tools that would be much more powerful than anything they had made before. Kate Phillips worked with Jake to select the best materials from their available resources. They found that certain bones from medium-sized predators had the right combination of flexibility and strength to serve as the foundation for a powerful bow. Plant fibers could be twisted into strong bowstring, while sinew from larger animals would provide additional reinforcement. The construction process took several days and required the combined efforts of multiple species working together. Vorthok crystal beings could shape materials with precise pressure, while Clicker warriors had the dexterity needed for detailed work. Even the Nephilim contributed by using their energy perception to identify stress points in the developing weapon. Jake created arrows using a combination of materials that no single species could have developed alone. The shafts were made from the straightest plant stems they could find, while the points were carefully shaped from the hardest bones available. Each arrow tip was pressure flaked using techniques that required both human knowledge and alien precision. Lisa suggested adding poison to the arrow points using compounds extracted from local plants that Amy had identified as toxic to similar life forms. The final weapons were unlike anything that had existed before, combining human ingenuity with alien materials, science, and multi-species collaboration. The first test of their new weapons came sooner than expected when a lone bone crusher appeared at their water source during the evening gathering time. Jake positioned himself at maximum range and drew the composite bow with its multiple-strand bowstring. The weapon had tremendous power that would have been impossible to achieve using only human materials. The arrow struck the creature in a gap between its armor plates and penetrated deep into its body. The bone crusher roared in pain and anger, but the poisoned tip began working, immediately weakening the massive predator. It took 3 more arrows before the creature fell, but the success proved that their new weapons could defeat even the largest local predators. However, individual weapons would not be enough when multiple bone crushers attacked together. Jake began teaching group hunting tactics that required precise coordination and timing. He organized the aliens into hunting parties that could work together without relying on technological Communication Commander Zex Thara proved to be an excellent student of these tactics. Her natural leadership abilities combined with hard-won survival skills made her an effective hunt leader. She learned to read the intentions of team members through body language and simple signals, rather than the bioelectric communication. Her people had always used the Clicker warriors adapted their combat instincts to work in small independent groups rather than as parts of a larger hive mind. They developed new forms of cooperation based on mutual trust and shared experience rather than the neural connections they had lost when their technology failed. Ben Torres contributed crucial knowledge about terrain and animal behavior that helped the hunting parties predict where the bone crushers would appear and how they would react to different hunting strategies. Amy Foster provided essential information about the creatures, biology and weak points that could be exploited with their new weapons. The climactic hunt began when scouts reported a pack of 5 bone crushers approaching their camp from the eastern ridge. This was more than they had ever faced at one time, and conventional tactics would not be sufficient to drive off so many dangerous predators. Jake developed a complex plan that used controlled fire to channel the creatures into a prepared killing zone. They spent 2 days digging pit traps and placing sharpened stakes while creating barriers that would force the bone crushers to approach along predictable paths. The battle required every member of the community working together in perfect coordination. Lisa led a team responsible for managing the fires that would herd the creatures, while Kate directed the trap preparation using her knowledge of engineering principles. Amy positioned herself where she could observe the creatures' reactions and call out changes in their behavior. Commander Zex Thara commanded the main hunting force of 20 volunteers armed with the composite bows and poison arrows. Ben Torres led a backup group equipped with the best spears and positioned to exploit any opportunities created by the primary attack. The remaining Nephilim used their energy perception to monitor the entire battlefield and provide warnings about unexpected developments. The attack began at sunset when the hunting parties ignited the prepared fires, creating walls of flame that forced the bone crushers to move toward the trap zone. The creatures were intelligent enough to recognize the danger, but their aggressive instincts drove them forward toward what they perceived as prey. The first bone crusher fell into a pit trap lined with sharpened stakes, but its thick hide protected it from fatal damage. However, it was trapped long enough for the archers to target the exposed areas around its head and neck. The poisoned arrows took effect quickly, and the massive predator collapsed without escaping. The remaining 4 creatures reached the main killing zone, where they faced concentrated arrow fire from multiple angles. Jake had positioned the archers so their shots would not interfere with each other, while providing overlapping fields of fire that the bone crushers could not avoid. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes, but felt much longer to the participants. When the last bone crusher fell, the entire community stood in stunned silence, looking at what they had accomplished. 5 of the most dangerous predators on the planet lay dead through their combined efforts, using weapons and tactics that none of their species had ever developed before. Commander Zex Thara approached Jake with something like reverence in her crystalline features. She spoke formally, thanking him for teaching her people skills they had never imagined they would need. More importantly, she acknowledged that human leadership had made their survival possible in ways that advanced technology never could have achieved. The victory celebration lasted 3 days as the combined community feasted on meat from the defeated bone crushers and shared stories of their successful hunt. Jake Morrison felt proud of how well the different species had learned to work together. But something troubled him about the strange energy readings that Ben Torres had detected from deep underground during the battle. Amy Foster noticed that many of the local plants had begun changing color and dropping their leaves as if preparing for a harsh winter that should have been months away. The animals they relied on for hunting had started migrating away from their territory in large groups, leaving behind empty watering holes and abandoned nesting grounds. Commander Zex Thara had been unusually quiet since the hunt, and Jake suspected she was hiding important information from the rest of the group. He confronted her privately near the water source, where they could speak without being overheard by the other survivors. The Vorthok leader finally revealed what she had been keeping secret. Her people's ancient archives contained references to this planet and the mysterious civilization that had built the ruins Jake and his team had been excavating. The technology suppression field was not a natural phenomenon but part of an ancient defense system designed to protect the galaxy from dangerous organic species according to Vorthok historical records. The original builders of this system had been a highly advanced race called the Architects who had dominated this region of space. Millions of years ago, they had created the ultimate fail-safe mechanism to prevent any organic civilization from developing technology that could threaten their control. The system worked in two phases. First, the suppression field would disable all advanced technology, forcing any visiting species to prove they could survive using only primitive methods. If the organic beings showed too much ingenuity or began developing effective weapons and tactics, the second phase would activate. Commander Zexthara explained that their recent success in organized hunting and weapon-making had triggered sensors buried throughout the planet. Ancient machines called devourers were beginning to wake up in underground facilities that had been dormant for millions of years. These mechanical beings had one primary function, which was to eliminate all organic life that showed signs of dangerous intelligence. Jake felt cold fear spreading through his body as he realized what this meant. Their survival skills and leadership abilities that had kept everyone alive were now marking them for destruction by machines, specifically designed to prevent organic species from becoming threats to galactic security. Lisa Carter joined their private discussion after noticing the worried expressions on their faces. She had been monitoring seismic activity around their camp and reported increasing underground movement that seemed to be following artificial patterns rather than natural geological processes. Ben Torres arrived with more disturbing news. His geological surveys had revealed a vast network of tunnels and chambers beneath the planet's surface that showed clear signs of mechanical construction. Energy readings from these underground facilities were growing stronger each day as ancient power systems came back online. Kate Phillips had been analyzing metal samples from the crashed alien ship and discovered that certain alloys were being systematically dissolved by an unknown process. She suspected that microscopic machines were breaking down advanced materials while leaving primitive metals and organic substances untouched. Tammy Foster reported that the dying vegetation was not responding to disease or natural environmental changes, but seemed to be withering from exposure to some kind of energy field that was becoming stronger. The pattern of plant death was spreading outward from several underground locations in a way that suggested deliberate targeting. The first devourer emerged from a hidden shaft near the eastern ridge just as Jake was organizing the daily hunting parties. The machine was roughly humanoid in shape, but stood nearly 3 meters tall with a body made of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Rather than reflecting it, its movements were fluid and precise, showing none of the mechanical awkwardness that might be expected from such an ancient device. Multi-jointed arms ended in appendages that could reconfigure themselves into different tools and weapons depending on what the situation required. The devourer scanned the area with sensors that glowed red in its angular head, then focused its attention on the camp where humans and aliens were working together. It moved toward them with purposeful stride that suggested intelligence rather than simple programming. Jake ordered everyone to take defensive positions using the tactics they had developed for fighting the bone crushers, but their weapons proved completely ineffective against the machine armor. Stone spears shattered on impact while bone arrows bounced harmlessly off its surface. The devourer ignored their attacks and began methodically destroying anything that showed signs of organized construction or advanced toolmaking. It tore apart their composite boughs with mechanical precision and scattered their carefully arranged food stores across the ground. Commander Zexthara tried to communicate with the machine using various alien languages, but it showed no interest in negotiation or explanation. Its programming was simple and absolute, which was to eliminate organic intelligence that exceeded predetermined parameters. Lisa managed to wound the machine by dropping a large rock on it from above, but the damage was minimal and the devourer quickly adapted its behavior to watch for attacks from elevated positions. It was clearly learning from each encounter and would be harder to surprise in future conflicts. The machine withdrew after completing its initial assessment, but Jake knew it would return with reinforcements once it reported their capabilities to the central control system. They had very little time to develop new strategies before facing multiple devourers that would be prepared for everything they had used in the first encounter. Ben Torres worked frantically to map the underground facility locations using seismic detection methods, while Kate Phillips analyzed the metal composition of the devourer to identify potential weaknesses in its construction. Amy Foster searched for chemical compounds that might affect mechanical systems. Jake realized they needed weapons and tactics that were more sophisticated than anything they had created before, but which still operated on principles simple enough to avoid triggering the technology suppression field. He began designing mechanical devices based on ancient siege engine principles that could deliver much more force than handheld weapons. The breakthrough came when Kate discovered that the devourers were vulnerable to intense heat applied in specific patterns that could disrupt their internal systems. Jake combined this knowledge with his understanding of lever mechanics to design a massive ballista that could launch projectiles with tremendous force. Construction required the combined efforts of every survivor working together using techniques that pushed the boundaries of what could be accomplished without advanced technology. They harvested materials from the alien ship wreckage and combined them with natural resources using methods that were sophisticated but not complex enough to trigger the suppression field. Commander Zex Thara proved invaluable during the construction process by coordinating the efforts of different species and ensuring that everyone contributed their unique capabilities to the project. The Vorthak precision combined with Clicker dexterity and human ingenuity to create weapons that none of their species could have built alone. Lisa Carter developed a strategy for using controlled explosions, created from natural chemical compounds, to create tactical advantages during the coming battle. Amy Foster identified plants that could be processed into materials with specific properties needed for their defensive preparations. As night fell, Jake stood looking at their preparations and realized they had created something unprecedented in galactic history. Organic beings from multiple species had combined primitive technology with advanced knowledge to build weapons that operated outside the parameters the ancient architects had anticipated. The real test would come when dozens of devourers emerged from their underground facilities to complete the elimination protocol that had been designed to prevent exactly what Jake and his allies had accomplished through cooperation and creative thinking. Dawn broke over a landscape transformed by frantic preparation as Jake Morrison made final adjustments to the massive ballista they had constructed during the night. The weapon stood 4 meters tall and was built entirely from salvaged materials and natural resources, but incorporated engineering principles that pushed the limits of what primitive technology could achieve. Commander Zex Thara organized the defensive positions with military precision that impressed even Jake, who had come to respect her leadership abilities. The Vorthak leader had learned to coordinate complex operations without relying on bioelectric communication, and her natural strategic thinking proved invaluable for organizing a multi-species defense. Ben Torres reported seismic readings that indicated at least 50 devourers were moving through the underground tunnel system toward their position. The machines were approaching from multiple directions in a coordinated assault pattern that suggested they had analyzed the previous encounter and developed counter-strategies. Carter had prepared explosive charges using chemical compounds extracted from local plants and minerals. Her background in archaeology had taught her about ancient warfare techniques that used fire and chemistry to create tactical advantages. The explosives were simple but effective devices that could be triggered by mechanical timers. Amy Foster positioned herself with a team of alien botanists who had learned to identify plants with specific chemical properties. They had created various compounds that could interfere with mechanical systems without relying on advanced technology. Their biological warfare approach was something the ancient architects had never anticipated. Kate Phillips led a group responsible for operating the siege engines they had constructed using principles borrowed from human medieval warfare. The weapons were crude by modern standards but incorporated alien materials science, knowledge that made them far more effective than anything ancient humans could have built the first wave of. Devourers emerged from hidden shafts at sunrise, moving with mechanical precision toward the camp perimeter. Their dark metal bodies seemed to absorb the morning light as they advanced in perfect formation, analyzing the defensive preparations with glowing red sensors. Jake coordinated the initial response using hand signals and predetermined plans, since verbal communication would alert the machines to their positions too early. The first surprise was a series of pit traps lined with sharpened stakes that had been treated with chemical compounds, designed to corrode metal. Several devourers fell into the traps, but their armor was too thick for the stakes to cause significant damage. However, the corrosive chemicals began eating away at their joints and sensor arrays, creating small but important weaknesses that could be exploited by follow-up attacks. The main ballista fired its first shot with tremendous force, launching a projectile made from the hardest materials they could find. The impact staggered one of the largest devourers and created visible damage to its torso armor. Jake quickly reloaded while his alien assistants adjusted the aim for the next target. Commander Zexthara led a flanking attack using the fastest Clicker warriors armed with weapons designed specifically for attacking mechanical joints and sensor clusters. The insect-like aliens had learned to work as individuals rather than as part of a hive mind, and their independence made them unpredictable opponents. The battle quickly became chaotic as more devourers emerged from underground positions that Ben Torres had not detected in his seismic surveys. The machines adapted their tactics in real time, learning from each encounter and developing countermeasures for the organic defender's strategies. Lisa triggered her explosive charges in carefully timed sequence, creating barriers of fire and debris that channeled the devourers into predetermined killing zones. The machines were intelligent enough to recognize the trap, but their programming compelled them to continue advancing toward their primary targets. Amy foster coordinated chemical attacks using plant-based compounds that could interfere with the devourers' sensor systems and joint mechanisms. The biological warfare proved effective because the ancient machines had been designed to counter technological threats rather than organic chemistry. The most crucial moment came when Jake realized the machines were systematically destroying their siege engines and would soon eliminate their ability to inflict serious damage. He organized a desperate assault using every able fighter in a coordinated attack on the largest devourer, which seemed to be commanding the other machines. Commander Zexthara proved her worth as a military leader by coordinating a complex multi-species assault that exploited each race's unique capabilities. Vorthec crystal beings used their precise movements to target specific components, while Clicker warriors provided distraction and mobility. Nephilim energy beings contributed by using their perception abilities to identify weak points in the machine armor and coordinate attacks at the most vulnerable locations. Their gaseous forms could not be easily targeted by the devourer's weapons, giving them crucial advantages in the close combat. Kate Phillips modified the ballista during the battle to fire multiple smaller projectiles that could overwhelm the devourer's point defense systems. Her engineering expertise combined with alien materials knowledge created weapons that operated outside the parameters the machines had been programmed to counter. The turning point came when Jake succeeded in destroying the command devourer using a combination of explosive charges and mechanical weapons that delivered precise attacks to its control systems. Without central coordination, the remaining machines became less effective and began operating as individuals rather than as a unified force. Ben Torres led a team that collapsed several tunnel entrances using controlled explosions that trapped additional devourers underground before they could join the surface battle. His geological knowledge proved essential for understanding how to disrupt the ancient infrastructure. The final phase of the battle was a grinding fight of attrition as the defenders used every technique they had learned to gradually wear down the remaining devourers. The machines were individually superior to any organic fighter, but they could not adapt quickly enough to the constantly evolving tactics. Jake found himself fighting alongside Commander Zextara in the final moments as they worked together to destroy the last functional devourer. The Vorthak leader had learned to use primitive weapons with deadly skill, and her strategic thinking complemented his tactical instincts perfectly. When the last machine finally fell, the survivors stood among the wreckage in stunned silence, looking at what they had accomplished. They had defeated an enemy specifically designed to eliminate organic intelligence using nothing but cooperation, ingenuity, and weapons that operated on the simplest mechanical principles. The most remarkable discovery came when the technology suppression field suddenly deactivated as the last devourer shut down. Ancient systems throughout the planet began powering down as fail-safe mechanisms recognized that the elimination protocol had failed and the organic species had proven their worth. Commander Zexthara activated her emergency beacon, and within hours rescue ships from multiple alien civilizations arrived to evacuate the survivors. However, something fundamental had changed in how these advanced species viewed technology and its relationship to survival and intelligence. Jake and his human team were offered positions as advisors to the galactic community, but they chose to continue their archaeological work with the understanding that sometimes the most advanced civilizations could learn from the most primitive approaches to problem solving. The final scene showed Jake teaching young aliens from multiple species how to make fire and craft simple tools while advanced starships soared overhead, carrying the message that true intelligence lay not in technological superiority, but in the ability to adapt and cooperate when circumstances demanded it. The galaxy had learned that diversity of approach was strength and that organic intelligence could overcome any challenge when different species combined their unique capabilities in pursuit of common goals. The age of technological dependence was ending and a new era of balanced development was beginning.